I'm Jay Horton. I make movies that make money, and this is Filmmakers On. Today, I am talking to Joe Dain, who runs Terra Films.
Hey, Jason. It's going really well. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you again, man. Your episode before was one of my more popular, and I even broke up little clips from it, and like I still get hits on those, man.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad to be back. I very much enjoy, doing these kinds of things, and I think anytime that I feel like I can contribute in any way to the independent film community, I try to do that. But I think that's also why, in my email exchange with you when I reached out, why I actually wanted to come back, because I really want to talk about filmmaker expectations in a way that they need to figure out how to personalize, in a way that's sensible as it relates to the business. And it's sort of spawned from a lot of recent things we have been dealing with some of our newer filmmakers, and also filmmakers that approached us about maybe working with us, whether it was our Terra Films label or our sister label at Global Digital Releasing, and me having to kind of really set the tone of like, well, no, we don't do that. This is why we don't do that. And feel free to go find that. And if you can, I wish you the best of luck. And if you can't, come back to me. And also, too, a little bit about, you obviously know, and I think a lot of your listeners will know that, I contributed quite a bit to Alex Ferrari's Facebook page about protecting yourself from,
Right, predatory distributors, right?
And aggregators. And
yeah.
I mean, that page really birthed from, Alex and I blowing the whistle on Go Digital, which everybody knows at this point. That page became such an incredible resource for filmmakers, and I used to contribute to it quite a bit. I don't as much as I used to, really a fraction of it. And it's not because I've lost interest in it. It's because what I've lost interest in is filmmakers not listening, filmmakers not doing their homework, filmmakers not doing their research, filmmakers not taking advantage of what's at their fingertips.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I can't get over how many times I see, and people that have been in the group for a long time and, asking the same things. Yeah. And I understand new people are going to come in and, they're going to maybe ask the thing that's been asked a while, but you got people that have been in there, that have been in the business for a long time and are still asking the same things. Let's start with like filmmakers' expectations, because I think it's a real, it's become a really big issue with filmmakers, because I don't think there is a realistic expectation of the independent film market or their place in it. What's your take on filmmaker expectations?
Well, that's a loaded question, and it really covers a wide array of things. So I'm going to try and keep it as focusing on the tracks as I can. And you certainly know I'm prone to going on a tangent.
That's why we love you.
I think there's a few things, and this is not going to be any particular order, and feel free to interject and ask me any questions. But
absolutely,
I'm going to start all the way with, you've got a great script, or at least you think you have a great script. You have financiers on board. And let's, for a moment, take out any kind of name actors. Let's focus on truly independent content that does not have the money to typically afford a star or even a B-level name, right? So let's focus on a truly independent film.
We're talking like 50 grand and under, maybe even smaller than that.
Well, I mean, look, the truth is that, and this is where I want to go, is that so we have certain filmmakers that we've come across, I know I've certainly come across, that will say, well, I can raise $500,000 for this film. And my first question always is, yes, but should you?
That's a great question.
I find that a lot of filmmakers are perplexed by this, and I'll tell you why. Because they're not educating themselves in the business side of things. They either don't know enough about the business, or they don't have a producing partner that does. And we see this all the time. Like, there are some producers that are purely creative. In the independent space, you've got someone wearing multiple hats. They're the writer, they're the director, and they're the producer. And maybe they have a handle on the material, maybe they don't, but they don't necessarily have a handle on the business. And so one of the things that I really try to impress upon filmmakers, especially in that stage of raising money, to say, look, that's great that you have investors. It's great that you have people interested. Have you really thought about whether or not you should make your movie for that much money? Do you think spending more money is going to make a better film? Do you think spending more money is going to get you a better deal? Well, I can tell you that the answer is no. That's the truth. The answer is no. And I've said this before. I mean, we've got films under our banner made for 50,000. We've got films under our banners made for 3 million plus, and everything in between. And I can tell you there has been literally no rhyme or reason as to why one film performs better than another. And I can certainly tell you that the films that have spent more money, maybe they look a little bit better. Maybe they're shot a little bit better. Maybe they have a little bit more coverage. Maybe the soundtrack's a little bit better. Maybe they have a name or two. It did not ultimately mean anything to the financial success of that film.
Mm. Do you think there's a level at which that does flip?
Well, listen, again, look, and I've talked about this too openly before. There's no crystal ball. There's
right, of course.
We can go all the way up to the most powerful men and women working in the business in the studio side. We see $100 million movies fall on their face all the time, with big movie stars, with
right.
with $100 million marketing campaigns. So when a filmmaker who's made a film for $300,000 starts crying that their film didn't make any money, I'm like, have you done your homework? Have you done anything to really look at the space? Because the truth is that regardless of the budget, we're in a time now that, although I think that we're in an exciting time for independent content because of the amount of options in which a filmmaker can release their content, we're also in a difficult time where everybody's releasing their content on these same platforms. So we have a glutted industry where the content is so overwhelming. The content is flowing from those self-releasing, from independent distributors like us, from the major studios who are going straight to streaming, to all the streamers creating their own content, to major networks putting content on the streamers. So now we have so much noise, right? There's so much noise happening in all of these platforms that this idea that anybody goes into this going, I have this expectation. And I'll give you an example. We just had a filmmaker who came to us, actually highly recommended by a major film festival that we tend to sponsor. And it was a horror film, and filmmaker sent us the screener and sent us the trailer and all the materials, and we liked it, and we sent over our terms and everything. And I always say, look, it's always open to some, negotiation within reason. And the filmmaker came back and said, oh, okay, well, listen, this is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a full buyout of $500,000. And I said, well, and I was very nice. And I said, well, that's not how this works. And I said, and when I say that, I don't mean about us, I mean in general. And I said, certainly go down the road and explore every option. I said, but I just want to tell you that I highly doubt you're going to find yourself in a situation where somebody's going to write you a check for $500,000 to buy out all rights of your film. So then he came back and he says, well, what about $250,000? And I thought to myself, okay, he didn't hear anything that I said. He didn't read my email. And I said, no, again, no, not going to work out. But again, go explore all your options and, come back. And what's going to happen is that filmmaker is going to be incredibly disappointed. And the reason I'm going to be disappointed is because they set this level of expectation. It's not grounded in anything realistic. And look, I'm the first one to say, shoot for the stars. I'm the first one to say, explore all your options. I say to filmmakers constantly, even if we do a meeting and you love everything that I said and you're interested in working with us, I always say, if you have other distributors expressing interest, go down the road with them. Don't hang out with me, and that's great. And I'm not trying to talk you out of business, but what I am trying to talk you into is doing your homework and your due diligence, right? Go speak to everybody expressing interest and then kind of lay all those offers down on the table. Look at them. What are the offers? What are the rev shares? Who's marketing? Who's doing what? Who's going to give me a better shot? There's just so many things. And again, I find often that filmmakers just don't do this. Look, we had another experience recently with a filmmaker. He's somebody, we actually gave him his first writing job on one of our originals. And great guy, wonderful guy. talented guy. Went on to make 2 more horror features that he wrote and directed and actually ended up self-financing. And, the first time it went around and he said, well, Joe, because I said, hey, how come you didn't come to us? And he says, well, I wanted to explore this other distributor. And I said, okay, fair enough. Next film came along and he wanted to come to us, but he had a sales rep, and the sales rep was like, oh, no, that's a rev share model. I'm gonna get you an MG. I'm gonna get you an MG. Now, the first film, the first distributor, he's never seen a dime. He's not gotten any reports. He's not gotten any money. He's gotten nothing. It's been almost 3 years. The second film, the sales rep did in fact get him an MG of $20,000, which is, is pretty decent on a small indie film.
Yeah.
And he kept every penny of it. Kept every penny. That sales rep did not give him $1. And now he's in a situation with a distributor who advanced $20,000. He's having to sit behind that. The sales rep kept the $20,000. And now he's screwed there. So then he finally came back to us on his third film. We not only just released it, but before it released it, I got a licensing deal and wrote him a check as soon as the money came in. And he was like, wow, this is the first time I've seen any money on any film. I said, well, and listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that, we're certainly not the end all be all of independent distributors. And there's a lot of decent ones out there, but there's also a lot of flawed models, right? Even with the ones that are good, even with the ones that are honest, there are flawed models, flawed contracts, people not, again, I get so infuriated by filmmakers who rant and bitch about, their contracts. And I'm like, well, did you read it? Did you understand what you were signing? Because if you agreed to a certain amount of expenses, if you agreed to unaccountable marketing, if you agreed to cross-collateralization, all things that I have talked about, Jason, until I'm blue in the face.
Yeah.
Like I've talked about things about like cross-collateralization. I'm like, stay away from anybody wanting to cross-collateralize your content and across the different mediums.
Right.
I've talked about staying away from anybody who wants to do an unaccountable market spend, right? But it's like, sometimes it's like talking to a wall. It's like you say it and then they say, okay. And then they go sign a deal that does just that. And then they go into a forum and they want to bitch and complain. And so, well, wait a minute. The person at fault here is actually not the distributor. You played a part in that as well. And I think taking some ownership of your job as a producer and to know what you don't know. And I say that very specific because I say it all the time. The most important skill set I have is knowing what I don't know and knowing when I have to ask questions and knowing when I need to turn somebody that's smarter than me in the room, right?
Right.
That is how you at least mitigate your risks. Really what I come back to is this idea that, and again, I've talked about this before. Filmmakers have no excuses today.
Right.
I just had the opportunity to be a guest speaker at the Philadelphia school system. It was called the Philadelphia Senior Success Seminar, and it was specifically targeting kids that were in their senior class of high schools that had like video and production programs, art programs, things like that.
Okay.
One of the things that I, bestowed upon the students, and I laughed to myself because I thought, wow, you're 17, 18 right now, and I'm going to be having the same conversation with you in 20 years. But what I bestowed upon them was like, hey guys, everything's at your fingertips. There is a tutorial for everything. There is a forum for everything. There are professionals out there like myself answering questions for free, okay? You have zero excuse to go into anything blindly, and you have zero excuse to say, well, I didn't know.
Yeah.
You didn't know because you didn't look into it, because you didn't research it, because you sat on your ass thinking that you knew everything and trusting maybe some person who didn't know anything, trusting a sales rep who maybe didn't necessarily give you the best information, not getting an entertainment attorney, or at the very least, reading the contract yourself to say, hey, I'm confused about this. Can you answer some of these questions? again, there is literally no excuse, even not having money to hire an attorney or have a screening. It doesn't fly anymore because the independent filmmaker community is so strong now. There are so many people that have been through it who are like, hey, let me help you learn from my mistakes.
Yeah.
That if you don't seek that out, if you don't look into that, if you don't evaluate any of this information, you don't, in my opinion, you just don't get to bitch when something doesn't go your way or something falls apart, because I'm sorry, you just didn't do your due diligence, you didn't do your homework, you didn't do your research, which doesn't make any sense. Because if you're an independent filmmaker who goes through the entire process of, you know, whether you're finding the script, whether you wrote the script, right, putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, raising the money, putting the crew together, doing all the things that come, especially with the independent film where you don't have money to throw at a problem and most of your crew is wearing 3 or 4 hats. If you're going to do all that work, see it all through post and get it done, and then you're going to tell me you're not going to bother to do any research on the business side of it, and then you want to bitch when you end up in a shitty deal with a distributor, right? I don't feel bad for you. I'm at that point, and that's why I wanted to talk about expectations. I'm just at that point where if you are too lazy to do the business side of the work, then you need to shut up about bad decisions you make because you made them openly and willingly and blindly. And again, I couldn't have said this 10, 15 years ago because there was a mystery to distribution.
Absolutely.
There was this curtain between filmmakers and distributors that couldn't be opened. And I understand that then. Now you have zero excuse. You have zero excuse. Now, that all being said, there are those who do all their due diligence, do all their homework, make a good decision with an honest distributor, and their film still falls on their face.
Yeah.
That is something else that I really wish filmmakers would embrace, which is the idea of like, hey, I need to accept the possibility that my film is going to fail financially.
Yeah.
You need to embrace that on the front side sooner than later, so that in the event that your film actually does well, it's a wonderful, pleasant surprise versus you going into a situation either with false, overinflated, egotistical expectations, or sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's like, oh, God, I raised all this money and I have to get the money back to my financiers. And then they sort of create this kind of, self-induced stress about having to make the money back. Well, listen, distributors, foreign sales reps, streamers, they don't care. They don't care that you used your kid's college fund. They don't care that you maxed out your credit cards. They don't care that you raised money from independent financiers that you promised the world to and then ultimately might not be able to actually deliver.
Yeah.
They're not there to think about that for you. And that's the truth. I mean, look, and I even say this from our perspective. What I always say to filmmakers who decide to sign with us, the one thing that we can promise is that we are going to give the film a shot in a way that you don't typically see in the independent space, right? We bring on the PR team. We guarantee all the social media, the paid ads, all of these things that we do that are built into the model, right? And what we say to filmmakers is that we're going to put your film in front of so many people. We're going to prop it up. We're going to push the reviews. We're going to, all of the things that we can do. But there's going to come a point where we have to set it free to the audience at large, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what we can't promise is that the audience at large is going to engage in your film.
Yeah.
And they're going to rent it and purchase it or even watch it commercially free just because it lands on a commercial free platform like a Tubi, like a Roku, like the many others out there, doesn't mean people are going to watch it, right?
Yeah.
And there is that reality, too, of just, again, getting filmmakers to accept the possibility that even if you have a good distributor, right? We all know about the bad ones.
Right.
But even if you have a good distributor, and maybe in some cases, maybe you got lucky and that distributor actually did write you in advance, doesn't mean you're going to see much more. Doesn't mean it's going to be a success. Doesn't mean you're going to even break even, let alone make a profit. And I'm not trying to be a downer. What I'm trying to do is get filmmakers to wrap their head around the fact that this is a business. It is a business with many moving parts. It is a business with many content makers at all levels, many platforms, many distributors, and you're one more film in a very, very big cog in the world of distribution and content. So for any filmmaker to be thinking from the independent side that they made a great film that's going to make tons and tons of money, and I'm not saying don't be proud of your film. Of course, be proud of your film, but know the business, understand the pitfalls of the business, and help mitigate your own expectations, which ultimately helps you mitigate the expectations of any potential financiers, right?
Right.
I'm going to give you another quick example. This is our GDR label. We picked up a really, really great romantic comedy. Beautifully shot, beautifully acted, really well done. No names, but a lot of big social media influencers. Okay. Now, that movie was made for a lot more money than it should have been made for, based on the idea that the massive social media combined social media following going to translate into transactional dollars. We did a special event for that film. We did it, and we don't really tend to do that, but we did a standalone special screening event where you had to pre-buy your ticket. There was going to be an opening from the cast, a Q&A with the cast during. We were giving away merchandise, all kinds of stuff, right? Because I thought, listen, if there's a way to see if this is going to work, we do a specialized, screening before it releases on digital platforms.
Right.
And listen, to the credit of the cast, to the social media influencers, they did their work, they did their homework, they did their job, they posted, they promoted across their platforms. We made $2,000 in ticket sales. Okay, that didn't even cover the cost of the special platform arrangements that we did. Okay, so we were out of pocket as the distributor. I kept getting these emails from the filmmakers every quarter. It's been out now I think 3 quarters now. Just not performing, even on the free platforms, even with the cast still posting the platform links on their social media. It's not catching with this social media following, which leaves us having to kind of find just a general audience, right?
Right.
And it got to the point literally, where I had to say, and we tried different promotional things. We tried different angles. We let them try different angles. We did lots of stuff. And I finally had to say to them, listen, because they kept saying, oh, well, we spent so much money. We spent so much money. We spent so much money. And I said, I understand that you spent so much money. And I understand that you made that mistake of spending. And again, it goes back to just because you can raise it, you need to ask yourself, should I raise this money?
Right.
And I literally offered to reverse the rights to the filmmaker, which is not something that we have to do. We don't particularly put in a threshold out.
Right.
But I've, over the years, if I have a filmmaker who's just perpetually unhappy every quarter, no matter what we do, no matter showing the analytics, showing what we're doing promotional wise, showing how people are responding to their film, I'm sort of at the life is too short place in my life.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's been several occasions in where I have offered to reverse rights and let them out of their contract because there's no benefit. There's no benefit for them to continue to be unhappy. There's no benefit for me to kind of keep trying to say to them the same thing over and over and over again. And I'd rather just let people kind of go their own way. And oddly enough, I've found myself in situations where I've done that. I've had filmmakers kind of backtrack and be like, wait, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, it's not that I want to let go of your film. I'm not giving up on your film, but I don't want you to feel trapped. I want you to be happy. And if nothing we're doing, which is a well above what most mid-levels are doing in the distribution space, then I want you to go and explore another option. Go explore self-release. Go do something else. But I'm not going to keep being made to feel like I'm not doing enough for your film. It's not us. It's the fact that the general audience is just not watching the film.
Right.
And I listen, I have this a lot on the front side when we're in the early stages of talking to filmmakers. I'm not a blow a sunshine up your ass kind of guy. I never was. I never will be. I don't tell filmmakers what they want to hear. I don't tell them how great I think their film is going to do. I try to impress upon filmmakers, if you have a distributor telling you that, who isn't going to write you a nice check on the front side, then they're just full of shit. And all they're doing is stroking your ego. And I'm not in that business.
Right.
But again, it comes back to filmmakers having to have some responsibility, some ownership of expectations of the space, of the kind of film they made, the market that they're going to be into, the flooded market they're going to be in. So all these things, they make me a little crazy. I mean, if you can't tell.
No, I totally understand where you're coming from. I think somewhere along the way, like filmmakers we really bought into this narrative. Like, you will build it. If you build it, they will come. If you build it, if you do the hacks right, if you hit your promotion just right. But there are some projects, like, it doesn't matter what you do. They're still going to fail. And that's a hard pill to swallow. Like, they can sit there and say, I did everything right. Like, I went with a good distributor. We ran really good ads. We had a good campaign. We had social media influencers. And then, the person next to him, did something, maybe half-assed, and it just exploded,
Right. And that's what you're saying is exactly what I'm talking about. The ownership and really taking responsibility and leveling off your own expectations has to do with exactly with what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Is this idea of, like, wait a minute, I made all the right decisions. I checked all the boxes. And yet my film fell on its face, but this other filmmaker I know didn't do half of what I did, and their film is reaping rewards.
Right.
Well,
so what was their secret? Like, there was some hack secret, and it's not, right?
There's not. And I say this all the time. You can follow the path of a successful film, walk in their footsteps, and not have the same success in any way, shape, or form. There is no model. There is no book. There is no ABC to it. And again, any filmmaker with half a brain cell in their head who pays attention to the industry as a whole and looks at the biggest content coming out from the biggest players with the biggest stars with all this money to market that fall on their face, if they then look at that and still think that their film made for $150,000 should have did all right, they didn't pay attention. They didn't learn anything, because the amount of money you spend on your film does not there's nothing that you're going to do financially, cast wise, anything that's going to guarantee you success. You have to be in this business because you love it, because there's nothing else that you want to do. You heard me say this before. I think I said it on your last podcast. Yeah. If there is something else that you want to do, then you know what? Go do it. Go do it. If you think there is something else that will make you happy and that you'll make a living from, then go do it. Because this is not that business. This is not that business. This is a business that is full of more disappointment than not. And I'll go a step further. Let's say you have success. It's even worse, in my opinion. And I say that, I mean, I want filmmakers to be successful. I do. I want them to make money. I want them to make their money back. I want them to be able to make money to be able to do the next film. I think that's amazing. That's the goal, ultimately. I always say it's not about this film, it's about the next one. But the truth is that if you have a film that's successful, now you actually have to work harder at mitigating your own expectations, because now you might be under the impression that, oh, well, I figured it all out. I know how to do this, right?
Yeah.
That's I think that is the biggest trap and the biggest pitfall too of having success, is that you suddenly think that you've got the model worked out. And I'll give you an example. I have a filmmaker that has a very successful franchise, who in the found footage space, who moved over to do a narrative film. I happen to know the financier pretty well, who confided in me that it was not a great experience, that the filmmaker really struggled, and that the cut was well over 2 hours, and they had to go back into the editing room, and they had to just do a lot of things. And again, it's that idea of like, oh, I'm really good. I look at the success I've had. Well, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do this. And it doesn't mean the same thing. And again, I think the thing that I want anybody who's watching this to walk away with is do your homework, check all the boxes, but no matter how many boxes you check, no matter how many guidelines you follow, no matter how much homework you do, no matter how great your experience with your distributor is, no matter how much money is spent on marketing, understand that your film could still fail financially. It could even get great reviews and still fail financially. Yeah. It could get picked up by a big streamer where you do get a nice little, chunk of money up front, but it might be the only money you end up seeing of significance, right? Mm-hmm. You might get a great foreign sales partner who gives you these great, asks and takes and ends up faltering flat on their face and makes 2 sales that are not even at the ask level,
right?
The take level.
Speaking of foreign, let's go on a couple other things. You were saying something in your email about foreign pre-sales reality checks.
Yes. So here's one of the things that I think is important. And there's 2 ways to really come at it. So let's say you're a filmmaker on the front side, you have your project, you have the money, and your money wasn't contingent on cast, right, out of the gate. Mm. And let's say you have a budget that's tipping that $300,000 line or over. Now, when you're in the purely independent space and you're at 300,000 or more, you really need to be thinking about how to mitigate the recoupable side of your film. Now, one way to do this, and again, it's not brain surgery, and I've talked about this before in the past, is go find a foreign sales partner that you actually feel good about, that's going to give you some good terms, and have them guide you in casting, right? Have them provide you some lists and say, look, here's the roles, here's the top 3, categories, understanding my budget. Where are you having good experience with a certain type of actor that is helping you make sales, foreign sales rep, right? And a good one is going to help you with that. A good one's going to say, okay, here's a list of, males 40 to 50. Here's a list of females, 30 to 45. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to get any of them, but it gives you at least some guideline, right? To be like, okay, great. Now I have something to think about, that if I get a couple of these actors, maybe it helps my foreign sales representative do a little bit better in trying to do sales for my film when it comes to that, right? And if you get a certain level of actor attached, that foreign sales rep might be able to actually do pre-sales before the film is actually even starting to shoot, right? Mm-hmm. Because they can say, oh, we have this one and this one attached, and start shooting in 3 weeks from now, and this is the type of genre it is, and are you interested? The other thing is, too, is educating yourself about what films are working and what aren't. I mean, look, we have at our sister label, Global Digital Releasing, we have some phenomenal documentaries. I mean, just award-winning, beautiful, amazing, that simply don't translate in the foreign market.
Yeah.
Where we can't get them sold. We can't give them away because it's not relatable to that particular country or countries, okay? Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? Know that going in. Understand that part of the business before you venture in, okay? Because I just had a conversation with a filmmaker, beautiful documentary, and our foreign sales partners passed on it. Mm-hmm. And it's not a commentary on the film. It's a commentary on the business, right? What people need to understand is that a foreign sales rep turning down your film is not necessarily because you made a bad film. It's because from their own personal experience, they're going, I can't do anything with this. I know the markets. I know the buyers. I can't sell this, guys, right? So know that going in. Stop getting your feelings hurt. Stop making it so personal. This is a business, right? And a foreign sales rep needs to be able to make money, as does a distributor in a country that needs to buy the film. If they're going to spend money, if they're going to advance some money, they got to know that they can sell it in their territory. If they can't sell in their territory, that's a useless commodity to them. That has nothing to do with your film. It does not mean you made a bad film. It just means that it's not necessarily going to move or translate in the foreign market, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Now, there is, all right, now I finished my film sort of situation.
Right.
And one of the things that we always talk to filmmakers about is I'm very big on telling filmmakers to exploit rights with multiple partners. Okay. So first of all, we don't take DVD. So I always say hard goods, keep them, go over to MVD, go somewhere that's going to take your hard goods, sell them yourself. I don't want them. And not that we're not that we're in the business of talking ourselves out of rights, but I always say, look, consider giving us North America, go find a DVD partner, go find a foreign sales rep. Now you have potentially 3 partners that are all working to monetize your film for you. Okay. You didn't put all your eggs in one basket. I always try to make sure that I have that conversation right away to say, don't do that without exploring your options first. Right. But on the foreign sales side, what I always say to filmmakers is like, okay, don't get upset if you take your drama, your little independent drama, and shop it around, and everybody's like, yeah, right? Your independent comedy, you know. And again, I'm not trying to sound like a dick. I'm trying to give a little tough love to say this is a business. Understand what is working, what is not, where it's working. And again, even with all that information, doesn't mean you won't find a foreign sales rep to take on your independent drama with no names on it, and they go knock the shit out of it out of the park. That doesn't mean that won't happen, right? But again, this whole conversation is about really getting a handle on your own expectations. Understand the pitfalls. You have a finished film, great. Get in line behind the other 10,000 filmmakers that also have a finished film that are looking for a home and looking for a way to get it out there, okay? There is certainly no lack of content coming, you know, at all of us, right? From to the aggregators, to the independents, to everybody in between. I mean, the content keeps flowing. And we have to find homes for it. We have to find ways to market it. We have to find ways to promote it. We have to find ways to hopefully monetize it, right? And so understanding all of these potential pitfalls, understanding all of the things that could go wrong. Look, and I hear this a lot about horror, right? Horror is like, I made a horror film. I'm going to make money. I'm going to make money because I made a horror film. Well, no, you have a better chance, I will say. I mean, it is a genre that does perform better than most across all, you know, platforms, across all countries. It does translate better. But we had I'll give you another example, recent example. It's not recent, but it's been ongoing. So we have a film where, so we do a lot of business with a lot of legitimate YouTube AVOD channels now, right? Which is, I think, really changed the game for piracy and really helped a lot with, you know, because it used to be that if your film ended up on YouTube, you were like, shit, my film's been pirated. Well, that's not the case anymore right now because of content ID protections and these legitimate AVOD platforms. You can strike down illegal versions within a minute, right? So it really it's helped not only monetize, protect from piracy, but it's also helped launch films all over the world, because I know for us, you know, we're working with YouTube channels where, you know, we're doing subtitles and dubs and we're placing in, you know, countries all over the world, and we have a reach now that didn't exist, you know, 7, 8, 9 years ago. So, but here's the pitfall of YouTube. And it happened with this one filmmaker, is that YouTube, everybody gets caught up on their views, right? Everybody, The views. And so we had a film that literally launched on a channel, and it had over 1 million views in a very short period of time. But when the revenue came in and we did the reports and we sent it off, it was pretty lackluster. And the filmmaker was like, I don't understand this. How is it possible that I have all of these views, but this is what the money came to? So I actually sent a frame grab from the dashboard of this particular channel. And what it showed was that several of the biggest territories, which included the US, Canada, UK, I think India was on there. The average view time was 6 minutes. And then people were turning it off.
Right, which isn't even enough to get to the second ad.
Right. And so trying to explain, look, YouTube captures the view almost instantaneously. But if your film's turned off in 6 minutes, there's nothing we can do. You generated no ad dollars, right? And so even having that conversation, we're constantly educating filmmakers. And I think where I get frustrated is I'm always happy to answer questions. I actually do love when there's a genuine question, but I also feel like there's a lot of questions that a lot of filmmakers today, and again, I specifically thought we're in 2023, right? Well into the information age. This is out there for you to know well in advance. This is this information exists before you even have a conversation with a distributor. In fact, you should be able to go into a conversation with a potential distribution partner already knowing this information so that you can have a strategic conversation and also make sure that you're having a conversation with that distributor in a way that lets them know, oh, this is a pretty savvy, smart filmmaker who's done their homework. Because if they're a shitty distributor who plans on trying to fuck you, they're going to probably think twice because they're going to go, oh, wait a minute, this person actually knows what they're talking about, right? So I'm not going to be able to give them a barrage of bullshit quarter to quarter. Again, I just, if I didn't like having my hair at 50, I would pull it out. Do your homework and do it to help you with your own expectations of what may happen with your film. Go into it eyes wide open. Go into it with all the best intentions, with a game plan, with a marketing plan, with an understanding of how to talk to your distributor if it's not doing well. How do you redirect marketing ideas? Don't do it in such a way where you feel like you can take on this victim stance. You've somehow been shafted, that you've somehow been screwed. And not that this doesn't happen. Of course it happens. Of course it happens. Look, you could, and let me preface that. I mean, look, you could do all the homework. You could do all the right things. You could know all the information. You can go into it with your eyes wide open and still get screwed. I'm not necessarily even talking about that. That's a different conversation.
Yeah.
I'm talking about your expectations as a filmmaker as it relates to how your film is going to perform out there in this very competitive, crazy, insane space. And I think anybody who's got, any kind of platform, like, listen, I mean, I've got Hulu and I've got HBO and I've got Netflix and I've got Amazon, I've got Tubi, and it goes on and on and on and on. And I got to tell you, when I pop onto any of them, I haven't even heard of like 90% of the films that are on the platforms.
They're big movies.
There's big movies with big stars, and I'm like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
And let alone the big ones with the big names that are being made by all the streamers or the studios that are dropping them straight. Then you have the plethora of independent content. And then you've definitely not heard of most of those. And for anyone to even just have the sense to pop onto a platform, see all that content, not be able to identify most of it, and still ask themselves why their film didn't make any money it's mind-numbing, right? It's like, wait a minute, what did I, what are you talking about? And again, let me go a step further. We have films that do make money. We have films that do well. We have films that have broken even and well beyond. We have films that fall on their face, and we have a lot of films that fall in the middle, where we're constantly sending them money. We're not necessarily changing their world, but we are sending them. They're generating royalties every quarter, right?
Right.
So it's not a commentary about that more than it is about you're better off going in, understanding that no matter what you do, no matter how good you think your film is, no matter how good it might actually be, doesn't mean it's going to take with the audience, okay? Doesn't mean that the audience is going to engage. And that's what it comes down to. Look, we're in primarily these days, the day of the licensing deal for independent content, I mean, you're laughing because is slim. It's slim. And listen, and a lot of companies are now in the licensing game. Roku is licensing now. Tubi is licensing now. That's on top of the bigger players like the Netflix and the Hulus and the HBOs, which are pretty much ignoring independent content for the most part, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like there aren't options to get a licensing deal. But again, there's just so many platforms. There's so much content. Please, filmmakers, please, really for your own sake and really for the sake of your sanity and your emotional and mental health, for being able to have realistic conversations with your potential investors if you're in that situation, please just do your homework. Please just do your homework. Just go in knowing that, and this is terrible to say, go in knowing that there's a better chance your film is going to fail than it's going to succeed.
Yeah.
And I don't want to sound discouraging. It's by no means meant to discourage. It's actually meant to empower. When I say that, it's meant to empower you as a filmmaker. It's meant to say to you, hey, I went into this with my eyes wide open, and it's going to help me maybe not be as disappointed if it doesn't do what I hope it's going to do or what I think it should do. But it's also maybe going to help me when it maybe performs in a way that I wasn't expecting. It's truly empowerment. And it depends on how you choose to look at it. And Jason,
totally.
You know this, right?
Yeah.
You have a choice in how you're going to take that kind of information. And
I think that's the difference between people that stay in it and do succeed and people that, give up and fail. I interviewed a filmmaker on my channel, and he had been watching me for a couple of years. He did really, really well on his release. Like, he was following one of my videos on FilmHUB or something. No, on FilmHUB. I think it might have been Indie Rights, and distributed. And he made something like 100K in the first quarter on this, little tiny movie. And he was talking about one of my videos where I was saying, how more movies fail than succeed. I was like, like the odds are stacked against you. A filmmaker on there had shared a video where he broke down numbers from 1,700 other films, and the averages were really low. But this guy looked at that, and instead of being discouraged, he looked at the one or two that succeeded. He was like, you know what? It's like I probably will fail, but I'm going to go forward anyway. I'm going to not invest more than I can lose. I'm going to do this thing, and he did win. Right. Now, he might not have, but he did.
Right. No, and that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, right? You have a filmmaker who did the homework, did the research, looked at the odds. Look, I look at filmmaking no different than gambling, right? It's like going to Vegas. I mean, the truth is you're you're rolling the dice. You are really rolling the dice, and you can put it all in black and all in red, and you might win and you might lose.
It's scary to think about, but it's true.
It's true though, and you've made enough, films, and I've certainly made enough films and been involved with enough films. And listen, I've been lucky enough to oversee, multi-million-dollar film funds and be involved with films that had massive movie stars that I still fell on their face, and so again, I want filmmakers to empower themselves by educating themselves and understanding the odds are against them, so that they are not creating added stress for themselves. Because I've seen that a lot of times. I mean, I've seen it where filmmakers invest a lot of their own personal money, and it doesn't necessarily work out for them, and suddenly now it's a whole other level of stress and anxiety that they're causing themselves. And I want filmmakers to love what they're doing, to be excited about what they're doing, to take a swing, shoot for the stars. All of that's great. I would never say don't do that, but don't ignore the business. Don't ignore the business. And again, I go back to the example I spoke about earlier. You're going to spend all the time, the energy, the money to put together a project, and you certainly know, Jason, it takes a village, and it takes so much time and energy and responsibility that you have to put into it. To not educate yourself on the business, the release side of it. It's exciting to get a movie made, right? It's exciting.
Yeah.
To get the script, to get the money, to get the cast, to get the director if you're not directing it. It's all of those things, to get into post, to have the first screenings, to do the first festival. It's all so exciting, right? You're on a high. And you're on a high because through that entire process, nobody's badgering about the return of their investment, right? Right? Yeah. You have a good year, right? Even in an independent film. By the time you get it done, you shoot it, you post it, you go through your festival, you have usually almost a good year, give or take.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden reality hits. It's time to deal with distribution. It's time to deal with marketing. It's time to let my baby go and see if everybody else loves it as much as I do, right?
Mm.
you need to understand that part of it. You need to understand that part of it. And like I said, because there is no lack of resources available to filmmakers, there's no excuse. There's really no excuse for a filmmaker to say, I did not know. Like when I see that and I said, well, I didn't know. Well, you didn't know because you didn't look into it. That's the only reason you don't know. You didn't ask any questions. You asked the questions, but you did it after the fact, right? You waited until you were disappointed or let down or your film fell on its face, and then you started asking the questions, right? Mm-hmm. And now you're pissed off about it because you didn't do it in advance. Well, you don't get to do that. You got to take some responsibility, take the ownership, take the accountability, right?
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I did, you had something on the email, and I did want to touch on this because it's a subject that I talk about a lot, the long gone TVOD window.
Yes. Also has to do with expectations. Okay, so there was a time in the business that, and let's put licensing deals aside. Everyone wants to talk about the big licensing deal, which just doesn't really exist that much these days. When a film would get released, there was always the transactional window first. Rental, purchase. So whether that was an Apple TV, a Google Play, a Microsoft Movies, Amazon, but not free with Prime when they were even still giving access to that. Cable video on demand, there would typically be about a quarter, or so where distributors would just release it. I think some still do, which is just insanity. Just hoping to grab transactional dollars somehow with this idea that AVOD or, free with Prime, was going to somehow undermine the revenue streams. Well, we're not in that space anymore. We're just not. And we personally don't do that anymore. We did. We used to do the transactional window.
Yeah.
And I always say to filmmakers who do ask me that on the front side, I said, well, sure. Would you like to not make any money in the first quarter or so of your film's release? Because the truth is that you've got a better chance that we do a wide array of platforms, right? And give people options. And what we have found is that releasing simultaneously on something like an Apple TV or an Amazon, as well as a Tubi and a Roku, for example, is that we're going to get different eyeballs from different consumers. Because the truth is, there are people who do not want to watch commercials at all. They have no interest. They have zero interest. But for those who don't want to pay the $2.99 or $3.99 to rent it, we'll pop over. And the truth is that we're in a time now where the ad-based space and the ad-based platforms, they're outperforming everybody. They're outperforming transactional. Here's the beautiful thing also, too, though. If somebody watches a film on a Tubi or a Roku and they love it, there's a pretty good chance they're going to go purchase it on Vudu, purchase it on Apple, purchase it on Google because they loved it so much. And they're going to add that to their library. But they started by taking a chance on watching it commercial, with commercials, unedited, but with commercials on one of the other platforms. That window, that TVOD window to me is dead. The other window that's dead, since we're on the conversation, to me is video on demand. Listen, we got to the point, we literally stopped doing business in demand, which services a handful of different cable VOD channels. Literally had the nerve to come to us and say, well, listen, we just found out that this movie we picked up of yours is also on Tubi, and we need a 90-day window. And I said, great, write me a check. Write me a check to write to my filmmaker, and you can have your 90-day transactional window. And then it was like, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, then shut the hell up, man. I mean, he's like I'm gonna leave this on Xfinity or Cox or Comcast or Spectrum Cable that nobody's been watching anymore, and I'm gonna carve out, Tubi and Roku and these other big AVOD players because you want your 90-day window. Get the hell out of here. Get out of here. So we literally announced on, because we have this. We have a filmmaker forum Facebook page that's only for our filmmakers. It's an invite only. We keep them up to date with these kinds of things. And I literally posted about it. I was like, listen, guys, FYI, if you're wondering why we're not putting you on video on demand, here's why. And guess what? People responded very positively to that. They're like, great. Because I'm like, look, I'm not here to not make your film money, because the way our model works is that you're not sitting behind a bunch of magical bullshit expenses. So we've got to make money for you, because if we don't make money for you, we don't make any money, right? And you know, so I'm not going to sit here and placate, you know, video on demand and a TVOD window, which I know is dead in the water. It's dead in the water.
Right.
You know, and so
I think I guess the problem is you're always going to have like a few individuals, a few outliers that do something like that and do well. Like I interviewed someone on my channel recently that did a TVOD window and did really well. But you know, it's like I told them, you're not the norm. You know, it's like
they're the minority, and I think that, you know, listen, and I love that. I love hearing stories like that, and I love
totally.
But they're rare. The truth is they're rare. To have a film that truly an independent film that truly performs in a transactional window only. I think there has to be something very calculated about the marketing, or something specifically tied to the way they did the marketing. To elevate that. And again, it's not to say, you know, again, I'm not sitting here saying that I'm some expert to say that, you know, no film is ever going to do well in a TVOD window. I'm just here to say that the TVOD window as a rule is dead because of the way AVOD platforms are performing financially, right?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
They're really just the platforms to beat in a monetary sense, and not just in a monetary sense, but even the ability to reach so many people. I mean, I think the thing that we always constantly beat the drum on with filmmakers is the repetitiveness of constantly promoting, right? So we're always placing our films on social media. Look, we literally have an elongated rollout. We release films across 12, 13, 14, 15 platforms, but over the course of like 8 months.
Right.
And we do that because there's so much content out there that films that sort of just kind of content dump, which is what a lot of distributors do, content dump, like, you know, all the platforms, one shot, good luck, you know, keep your fingers crossed. And those films are out of sight, out of mind within, you know, a week, maybe two, because of just, there's been 5,000 other movies that have hit the platforms in that 2 weeks since your release. And so the elongated rollout really helps us kind of beat that drum and continue to find revenue streams. But again, I think anybody caught up on a window, like if I really had a filmmaker that was really caught up on that, I might even go as far as saying, all right, well, why don't you keep this particular transactional platform for that window? I'll let you keep those rights, and you go beat the drum for a couple of months, and then we'll release wide. And if you do well, great. It's the same thing with, you know, theatrical. I mean, I still get filmmakers, you know, because we allow filmmakers to keep their you know, four-wall theatrical, and you know, any brick and mortar, really. I mean, the only thing is virtual theatrical. And we've still a lot of filmmakers that are, you know, really like hung up on the theatrical window. And I'm like, listen, I'm just going to give you the information. I'm going to tell you why it's probably not, you know, advantageous for you to do it, but go pursue it. Keep us informed. We'll even help you promote it on social media. And then when that window's over, we'll go launch it digitally. It's just having these realistic conversations with filmmakers to be like, hey, listen, that theatrical window is not going to elevate your film. The rare independent film that has succeeded in a limited theatrical that ultimately caught and exploded is far and few between. But if you want to take the chance, take the chance. Again, all of this, and I think I want to really kind of end on this note, is that everything that I'm talking about, and I said this earlier, it's not to discourage anybody. It's not. It's the opposite. It's to empower them. It's to say, hey, I have a responsibility here. Not only do I have a responsibility, I have all of this information at my fingertips. Let me go out there and educate myself. Let me really understand the pitfalls. Let me understand the good and the bad. Let me go into this with my eyes wide open, so that if my film is struggling, if my film's not catching, if it's not generating revenue as I'd hoped, I'm not going to act surprised. I'm not going to be like, well, woe is me, or start blaming people or blaming distributors. And again, not to say that distributors aren't to blame in some cases, and sometimes it's more often than not, sadly. But the truth is that there are good distributors, and there are companies that do care, and there are companies that give it a shot and give your film a chance. But you have to understand that side of the business. You can't be all about the creative, fluffy, shooting and post and, you know, lattes at the film festival and all that crap. Like that's wonderful. It's wonderful, but it's not, has nothing to do with the reality of releasing your film into the mainstream. And to not do your homework, to not understand what you're up against, you're doing yourself just a huge disservice, and you're certainly doing one to any actual investors that you have to pay back. Know the risk, understand it, embrace it, and make a great film, and go take a hell of a swing at it, and see what happens. But don't blind yourself. Don't go into it blinded. Don't go into it with your eyes closed, because again, you're just not doing yourself any favors, and you're setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment.